name is Noralis Ruiz. I am Centro's publications coordinator. The director of Centro, Edu Melendez, is in a meeting and he will join us shortly. But I just wanted to welcome you. We're very excited about sharing tonight two very important work in progress that we're currently vested in. A documentary on Tato Laviera and another short film about composer Rafael Hernández. So Eddie Aguiar traveled all the way from Puerto Rico to give us a sneak peek of what he's working on. So we hope you enjoy it. And then Elena Martinez will join us and to guide the discussion and to bring any comments you may have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're going to do, we're going to show the videos. It's two short videos, one on Rafael Hernández in New York, and the other video is on Tato Laviera. And the Tato Laviera is a work in progress. It's, we're missing a lot of information, but we wanted to have something for this activity. So, it's missing family members, it's missing critics from here, from New York, it's missing poets that we haven't interviewed yet. But we just wanted to give you a general idea of what the project's going to look like, and we also wanted for you to criticize that piece in particular, because it's a work in progress. The Rafael Hernández, thanks to Clemente Sotoverde's theater, they did a presentation on the music of Rafael Hernández, so they let us use a lot of the music, and also Pregones did a play on the Hellfighters, which was a group that Rafael Hernández in the 20s participated with. So there's a little story in terms of Rafael Hernández's participation here when he lived here in New York. Afterwards, Elena's going to do like a little brief summary of the two, of Rafael Hernández in New York and Tato Laviera. And we'll open it to questions and answers.
But I just want to say thank you to Centro and to Eddie for asking me to take part in this panel. And actually, also, I mean, I hope I can add something to the discussion, because we're supposed to have Juan Flores on this panel as well. So it would have been an honor to be here with him, because he knows so much about both topics as much. So I'm hoping that in this discussion I can be able to add something to what the movies also talk about. As far as the Tato film, I just want to say first, there's probably people here who I know people here who grew up with Tato, who've known Tato for a long time. I had the honor of working with Tato in many different ways, in poetry festivals. We did programs together. He introduced me to the Juan Boria and Verso Negro, that sort of genre of poetry. So I feel really lucky that I was able to work with him many times. And the one thing I must say about the film that I really like about the film is the connection you made with the Nuyorican poets and music. Papo Leto just told me that Pedro Pietre grew up singing doo-wop groups, was in doo-wop groups growing up. And I mean, if you listen to the poetry of Sandra Esteves, all her stuff is about music, and she sings her poetry and very rhythmic. So I think the music connection is just a really, really great line of thought there, and also that the Nuyorican were sort of coming of age at the same time that Boogaloo music is sort of happening, and this like new music that sort of defines the Nuyorican experience as well. So I think there's like a lot of connections there. So I just really thought that was like a really great connection, which I really hadn't thought about that in those terms that way.
There's a lot of material missing, because he was such a complex personality. So there's like the family part is missing. We need to do interviews with other poets that knew him, that that shared with him. So there's a lot of stuff still missing from the story. We're going to do an hour version of Tato. So it's like I said, it's a process, it's a work in progress. It's just we wanted to show a little bit of
it. And as far as the so I could speak more to the Rafael Hernández story. Obviously, I was in there telling some story, but also the reason I had been involved with the history and the work of Rafael Hernández was because I started in 2003. I wrote a nomination to get Casa Amadeo, Mike was on the show, Mike was on the film, Mike Amadeo. His store, I wrote a nomination to get that on the National Register of Historic Places, his store, which it did. It's now on the National Register of Historic Places. Well, the building that Casa Amadeo resides in is on the National Register, the first Puerto Rican place nominated to the National Register on the mainland. That's on the register because of Victoria and Mike's history there. Because Victoria opened that second store in the Bronx in 1941. So it's the oldest continually run Latin music store. In New York City, Mike took it over in 1969. So when I was doing that, I was able to do a lot of research on Victoria. So I'm not a musician, so I really can't talk to the music, the differences between Rafael's boleros and guarachas and different things. But my interest came in Victoria herself, was just their relationship together and her role, what she did was just such an incredible, so incredible. And Ruth Glasser's written a lot about this in her book, My Music is My Flag. And actually there's Victoria, if you ever want to hear Victoria talk, her interviews are you can listen to them at Centro in the archives, her interviews, you can listen to her tell her story, and she's, interesting, very interesting to listen to. And so that sort of, that part of the story was my main interest for a long time. And then my second interest came because I think the Hellfighter story is just an incredible, incredible story. And when I had first learned about it, I think it was at a Raisa's exhibit years ago, like 15 years ago. I was like, why don't more people know about this? It's so incredible. And then, the Hellfighters, the Armory, the 369th Armory is over on 145th Street, and was that like Harlem River Drive or something there? And Bobby Tanabe and I went to visit they have a little exhibit there. So we went to visit, they have a historical society, and we went in, and they had nothing about the Puerto Ricans at all in their exhibit. But we met the people who run the historical society, and they're all older veterans, like elderly veterans, and they knew they just didn't have the resources. They would, we would love to add more information about the Puerto Rican history. We know what's there, they just didn't have the resources. So we started working with the historical society there, and right now, we've been scanning. They found the music. They have it's like this size, because it's like marching band size music scores that they would put on their trumpets and trombones as they march. At City Lore where I work, they gave us all the music scores that they've had from the 369th Regiment. We're scanning them right now. So I have boxes and boxes of old music scores that we're scanning. So that, working on that project. So the story of Rafael's history, to me, is with the Hellfighters was so fascinating, and also it wasn't told. They didn't have it there because of lack of resources at the Armory. And then there's of course the Ken Burns jazz documentary, and I know Ken Burns is like low-hanging fruit to diss. I mean, it is maddening watching his documentary Jazz, because Latinos are hardly mentioned in a 14-hour documentary on jazz. Latinos are mentioned like 7 minutes worth or something like that. And Latinos have been involved in jazz since New Orleans. And of course, Rafael Hernández in bringing jazz, being in the band that brings jazz to France. So, and that's not even mentioned. There's like a whole episode on the Hellfighters, not one mention of Puerto Ricans. James V. Syrup went to Puerto Rico, 18 Puerto Ricans in the band, nothing. So you have that. And then recently, Max Brooks, Mel Brooks' son, just wrote a book, a graphic novel about the Hellfighters. He wrote World War Z, is that the zombie book? I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. He wrote another book, but World War Z, I think it is. But he just came out with a graphic novel on the Hellfighters. Nothing about, not even one mention that James V. Syrup went to Puerto Rico. And I just heard that Will Smith bought the rights to make a movie out of it. So there's probably going to be a movie about the Hellfighters, and we're not going to be in that history again. So it's just sort of doing that. That's sort of what spurred Bobby and I just sort of we want to do more with that story. And Bobby did a big concert at also which Centro sponsored that we're hoping we can do more with as well. But music, doing stuff with music takes a lot of rights and things. So but we've been working on that, and that story, as like Rosalba said in the film, his Hellfighter story and Victoria's story are, to me, like the fascinating bookends of this incredible life that a lot of people know a lot about. Everyone knows probably the story of Lamento Borincano and all the Preciosa, all the great songs that he wrote. But I think there's these other stories that sometimes Victoria's story and the women, like all these people who are like on the margins of the music business that never get talked about. And then and Rafael's early history in the Hellfighter. So that to me was sort of like the impetus to do like the research and work we've been doing with Rafael.
Questions or comments?
I want to add that for Centro, these documentaries, and we have a bunch of them that we have produced and a few more coming up, are all about reflecting, well, the changing nature of culture, but also this bridge, cultural bridge between Puerto Rico and New York, and how it is that we coin our own culture here, but also what one would have talked about tonight, which is the concept of cultural remittances, and how what happens here influences, the islands in the Caribbean. An example of this will be, Rafael Hernández passing by, being influenced by all that, and his music of protest, but also, Campanita de Cristal, and how this influences the Puerto Rican culture there, right? In the case of Tato, is Tato felt discriminated in Puerto Rico, just like, some Puerto Ricans may feel discriminated in the U.S. But I think Tato's experience, which, as Eddie mentioned, is quite incomplete there. It's about half of what it will be. It will be an hour, and we will have the other artist talking about Tato, and we will have his family and a little bit more of the upbringing and that experience. But it's all about how Puerto Rican culture adapts, influences, and evolve, and how it influences others. So I think that's the context for these documentaries and the ones that are coming. We have a few others in production right now. And so I'm glad that you both are working in these projects. Congratulations. I think, they still have some kinks to be ironed, but I think it's a great beginning. As a first cut, I love them. Yeah, they're very good.
What I found especially encouraging was the commentary on bilingual education. That is, the two languages on an equal level, one complementing the other. And being a pionero in bilingual education back in 70, 71, and the battles that were fought to keep it. And of course, the ultra-conservative UFT and the education bureaucracy just went in there and blasted it. And it brought to mind a superintendent, I don't know if he's still alive, Luis Fuentes, does that name mean anything?
Yeah.
He was superintendent of the Lower East Side, and of course, the UFT literally put a contract out on him. They worked like hell to get him out. But you had true bilingual education, which in its origins came out during that very vicious strike, which was racialized by Al Shanker and the UFT, where of course the school was closed for 12 weeks. It was all about decentralization. And of course, Helena Valentin played a very, very dominant role in that whole project. But it's still very pleasing to me, as I said, having worked in bilingual education, one of the first licensed bilingual clinicians, that the fact that this thing is still alive and it's still a dream, despite the actions of the bureaucracy and certain politicians.
Did you want to talk about bilingual education? I don't know if you want to comment on it.
No.
And a lot of the things that were said, there's a book, it's probably out of print, it's called Puerto Rican Children in Mainland School by Cordasco and Lucioni, two educators. I don't know if they're still alive, I mean, going back to the 70s. But a lot of the things that were discussed, that is the mutual cooperation on the same level. Now it's called, I believe it's called, it's no longer called bilingual education, it's called, I forgot, I'll think of it. But a lot of that stuff is documented in this book, which was the first book written about true bilingual education.
Well, just one thing I just wanted to make a remark about, which I can speak to more about, when Edwin mentioned, what happened here made such a difference back on the island. And Ruth Glasser quoted some historian in her book, I forget who it was, but back in the 30s, that era, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, all the most patriotic songs about Puerto Rico that really expressed this fervor and this really Puerto Rican sense of identity and spirit were actually written here in New York. Sin Bandera, all Pedro Flores' song, Rafael Hernández, they all wrote them while they were here. So, and then now they become these anthems back home. So I guess that sort of travel is always what's happening since the last century with that, the music too.
Just wanted to comment about, that's actually true. All the nostalgia songs were written in the 1920s here. Mm-hmm. But I think it was Roberta Singer in her book, she mentioned something that I think people still don't really internalize, is that the reason why Colonel Europe went to Puerto Rico to get musicians was because the jazz musicians in New Orleans didn't know how to read music. Whereas in Puerto Rico, every single municipio had a band. And on top of that, the bands were basically black musicians, because white kids were not allowed to be, músico blanco was not a good thing to be in the beginning of, in the 19th century, early 20th century. And so, in fact, the reason why most of the folks who were musicians in his band were black Puerto Ricans was because of the racial issues in Puerto Rico. Which is, I think, an incredible subject, to explore.
Yeah, the bandas municipales, the municipal bands were just an incredible resource. Was it Danny Rivera? Someone talked about each town had their band, and I think that is another thing that's not talked about enough. And these municipal bands grew out of military bands also, and I think Luis Santiago talked a little bit about that too. That the military bands and municipal bands have such an impact and an impact on the popular music of the United States. Again, in New Orleans at the turn of the century, when jazz was in its infancy and being formed, Lorenzo Tio was from a military band in Mexico and opened a school in New Orleans, and he's one of the early people that had influence on teaching people in New Orleans. So there was a Mexican instructor who had military band practice. So the idea of the military, the brass bands, these municipal bands had this really large impact on popular culture and the popular music. And we never recognize that. And that's this other thing when I mentioned Ken Burns and the sort of not being mentioned in jazz.
Juan Tizon wrote Caravan.
Yeah, in Duke Ellington, he was in Duke Ellington's band. I think the Latino presence is just never mentioned in popular music. We always get, we're just salseros. That's all we do. This is just salsa. And actually, if you go to rock and roll, Chicano influence is huge in rock and roll. But we only get mentioned we only play that norteño music or salsa music and nothing else. But in popular music, we have a very big influence. And I just think that all this stuff is always looked at in black and white. That, it's either Ken Burns looks at jazz by white musicians and black musicians. James Reserve was black, and he had black musicians. Instead of, there's just other nuances, other layers. There was actually a big Latino influence from the early days of jazz in Duke Ellington's band with Juan Tizol, and in this regimental band, which no one talks about. And that to me is a really important thing. That it's just so much stuff. Even I still see things all the time that just looks at there's a HBO thing right now, Sonic Highways, that the Foo Fighters are going to every city in the United States to look at popular music. Not one Latino has been mentioned. Not one Latino. Not even Tito Puente in New York. Not even, And so again, it's just because it's always looked at African American musicians versus white. That's the only way it's looked at. And to me, that's another problematic way that everything's always discussed historically. So.
Thank you for coming to this event. If you have feedback or any other comments, make them available to Eddie or to the production team that is here. As we said, this is a work in progress. Soon you will see, in a few months, you will see the printed version of this. And hopefully we'll have another screening when Tato is completed. And we have a couple of other projects that will be shown in the spring. So we welcome you to come to these events and to send us feedback about how we can best reflect the history of our community here in the U.S. So thank you very much, and let's thank the.
Thank you.